The Nevermets. By Salomea Becquerel. Part 2. When You Finally Meet. Departures by Philip Topol. I'm in love. Like a white pony. Sometimes it makes the bells ring. And I think to myself, oh my God, honey, honey. Mid-June, amidst late spring thunderstorms and with an inflamed heart, I packed my made-in China bag, said goodbye to my skeptical and moderately concerned sister, and checked in for a 14-hour flight to Newark. The night before my departure, I sent him one last email with the subject "A night between us, a day between us, instead of see you at the bitter end," and relinquished my soul to the hands of fate. Once I passed the U.S. Customs and marched into the crowded arrivals hall, a tall figure with dark eyes behind glasses waved at me. He did show up after all, and my heart sank when I first saw him. He did look like in the pictures he sent me, but immediately I sensed something unsettling about the vibe he was giving off, the ethereal magic of a person that is impossible to capture in a photo. We never FaceTimed or had a video chat. There was something oddly insincere and off-putting about that energy of his, as if he had a need never to be fulfilled and a lie written into his fairly handsome face, something that elicited both immediate disappointment, anxiety and fear in me upon seeing him for the first time. In hindsight, I suspect it was my instinct kicking in, trying to protect me from inevitable pain. Instincts are rarely wrong. I owe an apology to mine for not trusting them. I will never know, but a more rational part of me thinks none of this would have happened had I met him in person first. All the subtle features and quirks of who he truly is would have been far harder to mask than in emails or text, and I would have picked up on it way before I got emotionally too attached. I sometimes still wish I had the wisdom not to let a person I have never met in real life too close, moreover if they seemed like an idealized fantasy of mine, lacking a substance and details that make people who they really are. As I was walking towards him, I noticed his eyes were rapidly flitting around as if scanning the area for danger, lending him the expression of slight madness. Yet I gave him a hug, because for some eternally hopeless part of me, after all that virtual mess, he was finally here, made of bones and muscles rather than my own neurotransmitters. He grabbed my bags, said bye, see you Monday to someone in the crowd who turned out to be a fellow resident he had run into, and we started walking towards what I thought would be a taxi stand. It was 1 a.m. my time when I landed. I had been sleep-deprived for weeks, courtesy this ridiculous drama, and utterly exhausted by 14 hours on 2 different airline planes. Instead of hailing a cab, he ended up taking me on the public transport, which amounted to a 50-minute ordeal on crowded buses and trains with no free seats. I rationalized that as a resident, he counts every dollar, and I was actually prepared to pay for the taxi ride after he said he doesn't have a car. In fact, I made sure to have enough cash money on me. Yet somehow, he was completely oblivious to my fatigue, needs or wishes at that moment over some $30. In hindsight, my comfort was not worth even that to him. A very long hour later we finally arrived at his place, and the first thing he shared was that he rented out the spare bedroom and his new roommate is moving in within 2 weeks. So what were my plans again for the 2 vacation weeks in my itinerary after I'm done at UAB? That bedroom he said he would not rent out. It made financial sense that given I wasn't going to be in New Haven for 6 but rather 2 weeks, he would find a roommate. I had no problem with this pragmatic calculation, but I should have been privy to that decision prior to arriving. The part about him keeping a free spare bedroom for me was a major trust point in the process of our relationship. I was bothered by him telling me, in other words, that I either sleep with him in order to stay at his apartment or I can go elsewhere. What exactly does he take me for? Right there was my answer. Side note, following his welcoming response about working as usual during the time I was supposed to stay in New Haven, I made arrangements with other people for those 2 weeks, which I didn't share with him. My assumption was that in case it ends up making sense, I can always cancel with my friends and be in Connecticut for the 2 weeks after all, but that I should not depend on him and his reliability to keep a promise when it comes to my own individual plans. He proved me right the first minute. The fact he made a unilateral decision about renting out the room without telling me was a massive red flag. Was I finally awake enough to accept that he's nothing but a dishonest, piece of crap sleazeball that's after the one thing, and spent the night in the promised spare bedroom with the door firmly locked, left early the next day and forgot he existed. Nope. Whether I like it or not, I turned into a delusional cow that would have done anything to win his approval. He totally should have asked me for my kidney, instead of sticking to my boundaries. I ended up sleeping with him that night. Don't ask me what was I thinking. I wasn't thinking at all. I had a massive crush on him and I guess I didn't want him not to like me. He was also older than me with way more experience, so I assumed I should let him take the lead on the order of things. In hindsight, people who pull these things so ridiculously fast are never ever interested in another human being as a potential partner person. They have just one objective. If he had even marginal intentions to actually explore where this may go, unlike me, he was well aware that this is not how you go about the process. Truth, like love and sleep, resents approaches that are too intense. W.H. Auden. He should have been the person to sleep in the other bedroom, or on the floor, or perhaps strictly platonically next to me. But that would have taken a genuine interest in me on his part, only I didn't know that then. It's still astounding to me that he got what he wanted without it costing him anything, including an honest effort. From a certain very sad and pragmatic perspective, that's almost impressive. Almost. Moreover, it wasn't just the bedroom, there were plenty of little things I chose to ignore. I was expecting him to get some of the things I said I liked to show that he wants me to feel welcome and at home. There was absolutely nothing, not even a Diet Coke I said I drink too much of. Instead, he asked me if I wanted some wine. I previously told him I don't drink alcohol. He obviously wasn't paying attention and didn't care at all about my likes or dislikes, or my basic cultural habits. None of those little things that make people who they are mattered to him, while I, stupidly, remembered even the breed of the dog he said he grew up with, a border collie. One more reason to sleep in a separate bedroom and stop idealizing any bit of our interaction as a relationship. This was not a romantic fairy tale but a sad fable about getting manipulated into taking responsibility for broken people's happiness, and completely losing myself as a consequence. Like a missile headed for self-destruction, I consciously ignored all this that night. As I was removing my makeup, I was overcome by paralyzing anxiety. Like most, I looked reasonably acceptable with my makeup on, but I felt horribly insecure and vulnerable looking at my face in the mirror once it came off that night. I sensed that in his own head, only the sanitized and objectified illusion of me with the perfect skin, the perfect body, the flawless face and infallible character is worth his love. By revealing any imperfect parts that don't match up to that ideal, I'm setting myself up for an inevitable failure. When I came out of the bathroom, I said, if it seems to you that my face is gone, you're not wrong to apologize for the downgrade in my look. I should have never subjected myself to such expectations and judgment. But being desperately attached to him for all the wrong reasons during a Hello, Darkness, my old friend period of my life, I never stood a chance. For many years, I idealized this anxious emotional status of mine at that time as true love. It seemed giving, accepting, and not selfish, all those correct adjectives associated with love as a concept. Yet with the lessons of unforgiving time, I realized our entire interaction was nothing but a clash of mutually objectified fantasies in which I was just as guilty a party as him. My white knight in a shining armor that is to rescue me from my own Cetus, one that in reality couldn't sort out any of his own problems or take responsibility, all the while he was the person that caused those in the first place. I opened my suitcase, which, I am embarrassed to admit, did contain a dress I was going to wear when I go meet him in Birmingham, although he never revisited that idea and obviously never bought a ticket. Delusional is probably an understatement, and said I brought him something. I gave him a small box with 2 crystal glasses, and in response he kissed me. It was unexpected and a bit of a letdown. I was surprised and completely confused what it means. Hesitantly, I kissed him back and wrapped my arms around him, feeling his tachycardic heart on my chest for a fleeting moment. He lifted me off the floor and carried me to the bed in his arms, a singularly sweet moment that never reoccurred. While laying next to me, he told me that he was hesitant whether he should come to the airport. I stared at him, bewildered. He said I was wondering if this is some kind of an elaborate scam. You were wondering that? How many more red flags do I need? But even if an army of ghouls showed up in that moment, waving red flags into my face while singing Run for Your Life by the Beatles, I am not sure I would not have allowed what happened next. At that point, I have given absolutely everything to the possibility of us giving it a go, from buying a transatlantic ticket to agreeing to meet at his place for the first date. It took me years to realize that's what it really was. I was way past the banks of the Rubicon or redemption to hold out against him seducing me. I fell asleep on his chest once the deed was done. There was a storm in New Haven that night, waking me up every hour with the warning sound of a thunder right above my head from appallingly pornographic nightmares. When I woke up, he looked at me, said good morning, and we briefly kissed. I didn't know it was the last kiss at that moment. I was still sleep-deprived, exhausted and somewhat emotional, and could sense his own uneasiness. "How are you feeling?" he asked me for some reason. "Emotional," was my truthful answer. I felt the warmth of his body and felt safe, a long-missed feeling for me. I kissed his neck and said I want to get it on. I consider sex an expression of love. It's a form of connection for me and a comforting process. "Now?" he asked with both a shock and amusement in his voice. I nodded my head. Making love in the morning has to stem from something. I don't want to do it if I'm not sure what's going on inside you. Just like that, I was overtaken by shame and guilt. I remembered in that moment the scene from the movie Nerds, where Betty offers sex to her jock boyfriend, to which he responds with, "God, Betty, you're like a goat." I was shocked by that scene, thinking if a guy ever told me that, I'd never want to see him again in my life. What I heard from him sounded a lot like that, an inconsiderate, dismissive rejection. Everyone, including men, is perfectly entitled to saying no to any advances, but there is probably a way of doing it while taking the other person's feelings into consideration. With profound embarrassment, I got out of the bed, texted my sister this was a horrible mistake, went to the bathroom and tried to breathe. A harsh reality dawned on me. We weren't a couple in love. We were yet again complete strangers whose bodies merely briefly connected through a layer of latex, which it turned out didn't mean anything at all. The sinking feeling of that realization was like an anvil landing on my chest. I shut my eyes tight to stop a crowd of messy tears from coming. With a protective layer of makeup finally back on my face and clothes back on my imperfect body, I joined him in the kitchen. He was reading a paper and didn't raise his eyes when I sat down. I started to eat cheap cereals with cold milk that tasted like hay, while looking at him from the corner of my eye, highlight parts of a paper rather than talk to me, feeling eternal sadness. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I was perfectly prepared for a scenario in which I merely spend the night in a separate bedroom and leave the next day because there is no attraction between us, or for one in which there is a spark and we become a couple, what I thought happened last night, but I was absolutely unprepared for what this was, that he shamelessly uses my feelings to get laid, and blatantly pulls away the next morning. My stomach was knotted like a pretzel and I couldn't eat the food anymore. It was literally nauseating me. After the breakfast he said we will go see the city. Like a war captive, I just followed wherever he led. I have a fairly good memory, yet my mind was so clouded and fogged by my own stress and despair that I absolutely don't remember anything about that trip. It's like a blackout. I don't remember anything about where we went or what I saw that day, aside two things. He didn't touch me at all, and when I grabbed his hand for a second, he let go of my hand immediately. The second thing is when he said I felt the need to reach out to you when you stopped reaching out to me. I had no idea what it meant that time, but I just sensed that is not how things are supposed to work. I also vaguely remember he kept talking about himself, the people he knew and his work, none of which seemed particularly interesting to me. I remember thinking, this is such a load of self-centered crap. After all those hours on Skype during which I thought he's interesting to talk to and thought we connected, face to face I realized I have absolutely nothing to say to him, nothing in common with him. I didn't particularly like his gestures, his jewelry, or how he was coming across, a bit arrogant and full of himself, which is why I suspect he played that game with me initially. He wanted an on-demand cheerleader. He was not for me. All my love, my soul-consuming infatuation evaporated that morning with nothing but a bitter aftertaste and a sigh for what might have been. I can't say exactly what triggered it, but it was as if a switch had flipped. It was over for me. A line I never knew was drawn had been crossed, and there was no coming back from it. He was absolutely right all along. In spite of pages of emails and endless Skype chats, I had no idea who he was until I met him face to face. I was deeply in love with my cherished fantasy, completely oblivious to any parts of his being that were not congruent with that image while we were apart. When forced to face those in cold reality, I was not prepared to accept any of those. It was doubtlessly the same for him, but this is the part I do hold against him after all. He used my very real feelings to get me to sleep with him, while unlike me perfectly aware those belong to a ghost in my head who has his name in his face, but has nothing to do with him as a real person. He was the man in my dreams, just not of them. It was a soul-crushing realization. At some point he said he wants to get some food for lunch and asked me what I wanted to eat. "I don't want anything," was my entirely truthful answer. My stomach was hurting almost as much as my soul from my distress. I was holding back tears all morning and all I wanted was for the ordeal to be finally over. The whole sentence probably should have been, "I don't want anything from you. You have to eat something." He dismissed me. "I don't eat that much," was again my truthful response. He still insisted on buying me a sandwich at some shop near his work, half of which I ate when we got back to his place and almost threw it up immediately from the stress-induced nausea I had been fighting all morning. I couldn't even look at him. None of this were my dreams coming true. None of this was in line with his promises that he would never hurt me, make up to me everything he had put me through, that he would be honest with me and play fair. Why the fuck did I fall for that dumb shit? In fact, it was all very seriously traumatic. I was counting minutes before I'm finally alone and allowed to cry, as I wasn't going to give his ego the joy of crying in front of him. His was a basement apartment with stairs leading to the apartment door, and there was a fluffy, tabby cat laying on the stairs. I still remember the cat. It was purring as I was petting it when we returned from the completely awful sightseeing tour, and I found its presence and knotted fur soothing in my despair. I wondered why nobody claimed that cat. And how could he just let a cat be at the stairs to his apartment? Why didn't he feed it, take it to the vet or a shelter so it can find a better home? He said he liked cats. How could he leave an animal he supposedly liked uncared for on dirty stairs? That was somehow the last straw. At least take care of the cat, mofo, if you won't care for me. As I was packing up to go to LaGuardia Airport, I offered him money for the lunch and for letting me stay in the apartment. He looked at me with a wild expression and said, "I'm not a hotel." Then he asked what day it is. I said it's June 17th. "Shit," he responded, took out his phone and pressed a number. I was confused. Did I do something? From the conversation I overheard, it was his mother's birthday and he called her to say happy birthday. It dawned on me I know absolutely nothing about his mother or father, his family or friends. A complete stranger that has nothing to do with me. When he hung up, his phone rang again. It was my sister calling to check up on me after the message I sent in the morning. My phone was on silent and I didn't hear the ringtone. I gave her his number as a safety precaution. He passed the phone to me and when I finished, he expressed his annoyance that I gave his number to my sister. I almost snapped and said, "Well, I'm half the world away where I don't know anybody. So I gave her both your number and address just in case something happened to me." He only said it's time to go to the airport, yet another hour-long ordeal on the public transport, and started getting me out of the door. I was hoping that the journey to the airport would be uneventful. Boy, was I absolutely wrong. I suspect that he had come to some conclusions that morning, and in his eternal wisdom, he thought that the best time to share those with me would be on a crowded subway train. The place where I depend on him to get me where I need to go and can't get out, or ask him to leave. Out of nowhere, while waiting for the train to pull at the platform, he decided to have the talk. He said he is not sure we are a good fit for one another because we are a lot alike, which wasn't even true, and that it's generally better if people that are so similar are not together. I still remember that offensive bullshit. First of all, It's not even true. Second of all, you met me 18 hours ago and slept with me 6 hours later. From the perspective of basic human decency, are you absolutely sure that this is the best time to be telling me this? I'm not suggesting he should not honestly express his authentic feelings. After all, I never wanted anything but for him to be actually honest. But just like in theatre, timing is everything. I said that I don't think general truisms necessarily apply to individual people, to which he responded that that's what truisms are for, to apply general knowledge to individual situation. I was seriously losing my cool and said that I find citing general truths instead of taking responsibility for individual decisions quite alibistic. Hint, if you want to break it off officially, just do it already. We both know that this isn't going anywhere. He got the hint and backtracked, saying, well, I'm not saying that I will make a decision based on that. I am just saying that is the consensus. You will make a decision? What are you talking about? You must be completely insane if you think you can reject and humiliate me like that after the first night together, yet still think there is a decision to be made and that it's up to you. It's not up to you, and it never was. Moreover, this conversation should have happened the night before. I would have been sad but also relieved, and armed with far greater and legitimate agency in any decisions about where I sleep and with whom. Now that you prioritized your sexual interest over my well-being, wounding me horribly in the process, you really think that there is a decision to make? Even I am not that hopeless. The rest of the trip to the airport was spent in silence with me feeling numb. I tried to grab my suitcase to make it clear I don't need him to carry it for me, but he didn't let me. I checked in for my flight and he followed me to the security line. There he repeated his shtick about he doesn't know what he wants, the garbage that he's not ready for a relationship, and all of a sudden I interrupted his flow of stupid excuses with I wanted it to crash and burn because it didn't work out, not because we didn't try, which was unfortunately true. Once those words were out of my mouth, uncontrollable tears followed. I tried to leave, but he held me by the strap of my backpack. So I stood there, ugly crying, hiding my red face with my hands. This was the end of the road for me, a first date at the end of which I'm crying in public in front of someone I don't even know. I have never felt more pathetic, and more upset with myself. How the fuck did I get there? He kept blabbering the same shit about not being ready for a relationship, but he was totally ready to sleep with me last night, which in this context amounts to rape by deception. Because if I knew he's going to pull this shit, I would have never, ever done that. How he's not able to give me his decision right there, right now, that he needs time. Ugh, how very broken he is, can't argue with that one, that he just doesn't know what he wants and I should give it time for my own sake because we had our first date, and it wasn't utterly bad, WTF? It was a complete disaster. How can he not see that it's over, and that I should not be making any decisions at that moment either? In summary, just a pathetic crap that doesn't mean anything. Edit 2022. I found this video https://youtube.b/_302sq9n1u that in retrospect makes me feel so seen and validated. He'd never hesitate if he actually really liked me. He'd never put me through such shit if he minimally cared about me as a fellow human being. He'd never sleep with me only to hurt me the next day if he were a decent guy. None of this would have happened if he were a good person. Exhausted and completely empty, with my heart shattered into a million pieces, I laid my face on his shoulder for a brief moment to exhale, and my tears along with some mascara soaked into his white t-shirt. Will it wash off? He asked me with a horror in his voice. I nodded that it will, not really caring if that's true, and went to the security line to have my backpack and shoes x-rayed. I sensed he's still standing there, but I refused to look his way. Once I was through the security, I ran to the bathrooms faster than a cholera patient, closed the door to the stall and started crying uncontrollably again. I could not believe how used I got, after choosing a completely wrong person that I know from the beginning will only break my heart at the end, and letting them do just that. Sure, the whole fiasco was his lapse of judgment, character and responsibility, but I should have never been there in the first place. That was totally on me. Yet something happened in the bathroom stall at that very moment, at that very place, with my face swollen, red like a beet, with makeup smudged all over it, and his words about not making a snap decision and giving it time echoing in my head. I did in fact make a decision. Enough. Enough of this shit, where in search of validation I end up at bad places with bad people, compromising my values and boundaries, liking myself all that less. I'm way better than this, and the only person that needs to be sure of that is me. I don't need anyone's external evaluation and feedback report. I need mine. I wasn't sure what was coming my way, but I knew that if I don't change this paradigm, it will never be anything good. I will never be able to build a sustainable future of any kind if I keep choosing completely unsuitable people to project my fantasies onto because of my traumatic past, only to expect them to act as the people I hope they are, rather than who they really are. They can never be that, even if they wanted to. Of all places, in a dirty airport bathroom stall filled with a light urine odor, I was overcome by a sudden clarity. This guy doesn't love me at all. And that's okay, he isn't for me, and it's not about him. It's about me, and my job at UAB is to do the very best I can, focus strictly on things I control such as my work, and not let anyone or anything jeopardize this opportunity. If I focus on being excellent in the lab, rather than morphing into someone else's unachievable fantasy so they finally think I might be good enough for them, there is a chance my dreams will come true without ever needing those people. I got the chance at UAB thanks to my perseverance and my CV, not a dude. This should be my focus, and I will not let anyone distract me from this. With this authentic mindset, I felt at peace and my tears stopped flowing. I took my cell phone and immediately deleted all his pictures. Then opened the stall door, washed my face with cold water and started walking to the departure gate of American Eagle flight to Birmingham, Alabama, the gate to my real dreams.